Hi again, this is Betsy Scott with the Housing Innovation Alliance. I'm joined today by Paige Murphy on our team, who's managing your Q&A as it comes in and recording today's session. So thank you all for joining us. We have a great panel aligned today. Who we'll get to in just a moment to introduce you to all of them. But we are focusing today on emerging trends and attitudes with consumers, housing providers, and developers. You know, a lot has changed over the last couple of months on how people are thinking about home improvement projects, the next home that they purchase or rent. And we've got a lot of insights from a great mixture of people today, both on the research side, architectural. We've got a couple of builders joining us today as well. So very excited to get them started sharing their insights with you. We are not going to talk about marketing of homes so much today, but you know, in light of what's going on with COVID, but we do have one of these coffee talks from a few weeks ago that we'll also send you the links to. And if you do have questions on that front for the panel, we'll hold those until the end of the call as well, in case they have insights for you also. The Housing Innovation Alliance is a nationwide community of game changers from dirt to dweller, looking at the future of home delivery through crowd-accelerated innovation. And really what that means is we think that all of us individually are very smart and have something to bring to the table, but what becomes really powerful is when we get our collective intelligence together and look at how we can see trends, how we can solve problems, and how we can drive innovation in the industry. We are focused on production, housing, and development as well. And everything that we do from a programming perspective would not be possible without the support of our partners, who really we consider underwriters of our program. So I just want to take a moment to thank them for their support throughout the year and for making programs like today's event possible. So without further ado, in just a second, I'm going to hand the reins over to Dennis Webb. He's with Fulton Homes. He's their Vice President of Operations. And Fulton is the largest privately owned and operated home builder in Arizona. They are super innovative on many levels. They actually are a 6-time winner of the Energy Star Partner of the Year for the last 6 years running. And they're also an Indoor Air Plus leader for the last 5 years running. In addition to that, I think he brings a unique perspective to the table in that they have a very vast portfolio of interesting home designs and floor plans. And they also do a great job of leveraging technology throughout the buying process and using the information they gather from engaging their customers to continually evolve their product. So I will leave it to Dennis in a moment to introduce you to the rest of the panelists. As you listen to everybody for the first half hour or so as we do the first questions today, be thinking about what you want to ask them and feel free to either type in the chat function or type in Q&A. You can also at any point raise your hand, and Paige and I will be watching for your input and ideas and helping Dennis collect that and get you participating in the discussion as well. We'd like this to be as robust as possible. So if you have a question or an idea, either way, just let us know through the chat function or the Q&A. And I'm going to turn things over to Dennis to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Betsy. Pleasure. Thank you for the very kind words. You actually made our company sound way better than it is, so I appreciate that. We've got a great panel. I'm really excited to be on this diverse group of people because everyone brings a little different perspective, and I, for one, want to learn more about these things and kind of put it together in my own mind and say, God, are we on the right track? Should we be doing something different? Should we be, you know, there's just so many things going on out there that it could be just really exciting to have a great webinar this morning or this afternoon. It's morning here in Phoenix. I'm in Tempe, Arizona. It's a cool 110 today. So it's no problem. So on our panel, first off is Matt Daigle. Matt is the CEO and founder of RISE. RISE is a leading online authority in sustainable home improvement. Matt and his team recently conducted a remodeling focused study with our online community folks with an above average affinity for sustainability. So I really look forward to Matt's contribution to this morning's panel. Next, we have David Dixon, and David is the VP of Stantec's Urban Places Fellow. Residential Architect Magazine named David to their Hall of Fame as the person we call to ask about cities. In recent years, he's led planning in post-Katrina New Orleans, transformed strip malls into suburban downtowns, and initiated a broad appraisal of the role of density in building more living, resilient, and equitable communities. Third on our panel is Nancy Keenan. Nancy Keenan is the president and CEO of the Dahlin Group. Dahlin is a diverse architectural and planning firm practicing globally. Passion for place is evident in all we do with developers, municipalities, and private clients across a diversified portfolio of residential, commercial, institutional, and civic work. They recently spearheaded an American at Home study in partnership with the marketing expert Terry Slavik-Tashuki of TST Link and consumer strategist Belinda Sward of Strategic Solutions Alliance. And we're going to hear a lot about that from Nancy shortly. Our next panelist is Ashley Kent. Ashley is president of Kent Homes. Ashley is an active adult builder who delivers homes on your lot or in well-established communities in the coastal Carolinas. Ashley has a unique perspective, having worked her way up on the ranks to become president of the organization, and she's a recent recipient of Pro Builders 40 Under 40. And I think that means she's really young, okay? Congratulations. And finally, we have Jenny Lance, and Jenny is the senior manager of Design Lens at John Burns Real Estate Consulting. Jenny curates and creates the content for Design Lens and tracks design trends around the country. She previously worked for Bassenian Lagoni Architects, who built my house, by the way, in supporting their marketing, land planning, and design departments. So we look forward to hearing from Jenny as well. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to go back to Matt and kind of ask you a few questions. You've recently reached out to your community to gauge how their attitudes towards home and sustainability have changed in light of COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about your audience and the scope of your studies?
Yeah, for sure, and thanks, Dennis. So in the last year, we've welcomed, or RISE has welcomed, just over 1 million homeowners who want to learn more about how to turn their home improvement project into a sustainable one. So pretty fairly educated audience. And what we'll do is we often survey our audience to get a pulse of current and future trends. We actually did this a similar study back in March, and so we pulled what we ended up doing in May, and to kind of see a trajectory of progress over these last few months. We pulled our audience for 3 weeks and created a report around our findings along with social sentiment data to help kind of put it all pull it all together. And we'll actually be sharing that with you guys here shortly. But the short of it is, and kind of what we found is that, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has really prompted an increase in homeowners' concerns for their health and safety, for their families' health and safety. And, you know, things like home air quality, cleanliness, and durability are like top of mind. We're also actually seeing a huge trend in DIY. So a lot of homeowners are spending a lot more time at home these days, and they actually want to do a lot of the work themselves. So while they're very conscious of their pocketbook, they're focusing on smaller projects that they can actually do themselves, sometimes with just with light assistance from professionals. But that want for home renovations is not going away anytime soon. So personally for RISE, we've actually seen quite an increase in the size of our audience just these past few months. And that alone is quite an indicator of the times we're in.
We don't want those guys to do too much stuff. We'd kind of rather have them buy new houses, you know. Please be careful. David, you've got a fabulous background. I'm kind of interested in, you know, kind of what you're looking at. So, in the recent past, there's been a greater discussion about attainability in housing and increasing density as a means to achieve it. What impact do you see the pandemic having on those trends?
Thank you. That's a great question, and it's one that I'm a planner and urban designer, so in working with a number of cities and private clients, and it's one everyone's asking. And I would say that the more we've thought about it, and the more we've talked, particularly to the real estate consultants with whom we work, housing, office, retail, et cetera, and to also the economic development consultants we work with, who are really looking at where jobs are coming from, where industries are headed. The conclusion we come to is that when the pandemic is over, and someday it will be, that the fundamental trends that were in place before the pandemic will still be fully in place. I mean, the fundamental trends shaping our communities. So that, and this is encouraging for those of you who build homes to sell that are multifamily, in multifamily buildings, that 80+% of net new households for the next 20 years, that's a new norm, will be singles and couples. More than half our US population growth is over 65. There are many regions in which all the net new demand, all the net new households will in fact be singles and couples. And so therefore, if you're urban, if you're walkable, if you're downtown, you will continue to have a great future ahead of you. We've talked to a lot of folks about, there were a whole series of articles, New York Times included, saying, is this the end of density, et cetera. I remember one line in that article that said, cities are too expensive, and at the same time, they're losing their allure. Those two sentiments don't fit in the same sentence. They're too expensive because they have lots of allure. And when you look at the activity, the home preferences right up through today of the key groups who really form the bulk of our growing markets, they are still profoundly urban. And I'll finish with one other note. We also are entering a world where, I should say, no kids means our workforce is going to be growing a lot more slowly. It's already growing about at half the pace it grew in 2010. In 2040, we'll still add fewer net new workers than we did in 2010. All our job growth is really coming, particularly good jobs, is coming from knowledge, innovation, industries, et cetera. They are facing a profound labor shortage. Working from home may change some of this, but by and large, they are going where their workforce wants to go. And basically, the more education you have, and therefore the more income, the more urban your housing preferences are. So I think, to be very blunt, I remain fully confident and are working with a series of clients who ultimately are too, that the trends that were reshaping our built environment into much more and really benefiting urban places before the pandemic will be fully in place. Timing may change, different, change will be somewhat regional, but over the mid and longer term. I hope that gets to your question.
So you're not going to be moving out to the suburbs next week, huh?
No, I don't want to make any comments about where prices have been rising since 2000, roughly 70 or 80% faster per square foot in urban areas than in suburban areas. And we, in the work we do and the work with our clients we do, don't see any change in that over the longer term, in that trend.
Okay. Nancy, let's go to you. Let's talk about this American home study. It's a fascinating, it's a fascinating study that you've undertaken. I've read a lot about it, and I thought it was really interesting. A lot of the observations you guys came up with. Nearly half of the millennials in your survey made changes to their garage as a result of the pandemic. What were the top 3 things they did? What should home builders and architects respond when designing new housing projects?
So to tell you a little bit, thanks Dennis, but to tell you a little bit about the America Home Study, we launched it a few weeks after after the stay-at-home orders came in place here in California. People were asking a lot of questions about how this was changing other businesses, speculating about how it could change our homes, but no one had really asked consumers what they thought about how it could change homes. So we launched a study. Terry and Belinda are both experts at doing this. It's a study across the US of over 3,000 respondents. And that study was then broken up into various age groups and demographics. And so the millennials, interestingly, came back with some pretty specific results. And one of them, as you said, is how they might have changed their garages already. They've gone in already and done things like modified a garage to work as a home gym, a home office, flexible space. And across the board, people were saying that they were using their garages differently. So we can start to think about ways that we could, as designers, look at the garage differently in the future. We've already seen a trend of oversizing garages for maybe storage, but does that also mean you could come in and use modular systems to create flexible office space or a flexible space for a home gym? So millennials were very willing to start to pay for those kinds of options in their home and in their garage.
Great. Ashley, welcome. So, how have your conversations with home buyers changed in the first half of 2020?
Well, thank you, Dennis. Well, at first, most of our buyers, they really do come from the Northeast. So a lot of our prospective buyers were really at home a lot more than I think than everyone would have liked. So we definitely, in terms of the beginning of the process, we saw, our active adults really start to embrace technology. We started using Zoom to do virtual walkthroughs of the home, FaceTime, GoToMeeting in terms of, again, that beginning process. Thankfully, we also had a very long backlog at the time and thankfully still do. But, with our team, it's really, hug your backlog, let them know that we're here, we're going to be in business, we're going to keep going. And so really, developing, I'd say, better relationships probably than we had and better empathy with our buyers. In terms of some of the things they were looking for, I wouldn't say that we've seen anything, too drastically different. We are a portfolio builder, so, we'll bump garages out and we have a plethora of options. But we've definitely seen here, in coastal North Carolina, people really want to take advantage of that indoor-outdoor living. So lots of enclosures, some flex spaces to utilize, pocket offices or workshops in the garages. So really it's just people, seeing what's happening and wanting to take advantage and have a safe and more comfortable place to live.
Notice that you guys have done a great job of using your website to kind of promote Matterport tours and things like that, where I know Bessie said we wouldn't talk about marketing, but I can't help myself. So I want to learn what you did about that, because you're able to sell houses for people not being there.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, thankfully we already had a pretty good backlog of Matterport with our model homes, which really helped. So we've really tried to, get that one-on-one appointment, and maybe it was over Zoom, and our salespeople taking people through that just to make sure they really understood what they were looking at. And I think that's really, what we've tried to change is, it's great that someone wants to go on our website and look, but hey, let's present them the home the way we want them to see it, just to make sure they're not missing any of these features and benefits. And again, just to make the ease of technology very smooth.
Great. Jenny, let's go over to you with your background and everything. So both Redfin and Realtor.com reported major increase in the search for single-family homes in suburbs and huge decreases in downtown and condos. This is not exactly welcome news to David, but that's okay. We need some controversy here, So how do you see in your studies, how do you see that that working?
Well, Dennis,
I'm not putting you on the spot, you know.
no, I think we're in an era of unprecedented choice. I mean, I think, well, I mean, like, we just talked about on our company call this Monday about how the second home market is booming in sort of secondary markets, and it's these people who've been sitting in the cities are now wanting that place to get out. But I also feel like, shoot, if you like to live in the city near things and go to the concerts and museums, and you're gonna want that no matter what. I mean, so I'm with David, you know, that the city dwellers there's still going to be a premium for the cities, but I think a lot of this stay-at-home orders and everything have really opened people up to, hey, if I can work at home, could I live further away? You know, in the Bay Area, I know places like River Islands and Lathrop are you know, that's actually a real consideration of, okay, if I only have to drive into the Bay Area a couple days a week, could I live a few hours away instead of being so close? So I think that opening up I think that peaked interest for single family has really stemmed from kind of that wanting to get out of the city, having the opportunity to move away from some of those hot zones of employment. But I don't think I don't think Dead City's going away anytime soon. I'm with David. I think we have both markets that we can really cater to and support.
Well, you touched on your second question here, and that's the idea of a hot job market and people moving from more expensive cities to more reasonable cities, so they can, you know, they can really take advantage of that. So my next door neighbor just sold their house to a couple from Livermore, California. They wanted something that's easy to take care of, and they were able to pocket several $100,000 and have a nicer house in Tempe than they could in Livermore. Okay, so how does that work?
We've been talking a lot about well, I mean, I think cheaper markets are still going to get people coming out to them. I mean, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And we've been talking a lot about how work from home will affect that, and what markets will that open, and what opportunities does that create, and how many people will continue working from home when we go back to the office. I mean, I work from home full time, but we have multiple offices that people are slowly going back to. So I think that the sort of shift to different markets, I think we have an opportunity right now. I mean, that's a multi-part question, Dennis. So I'd say less expensive markets are always going to have their appeal. I mean, shoot, if you can sell your home in Livermore and pocket a couple $100,000 and then move to a really great home with a pool in the backyard in Arizona, and you get the heat, that's not going to go away. But I think some of those tertiary markets are going to be able to open up. I mean, I just talked to somebody who lived in Steamboat Springs, which is the mountains of Denver and is nowhere close to anything. But they had the opportunity because of work from home. So they could be in that sort of secondary market that isn't as expensive and whatnot. So I think the work from home is shifting, kind of needing to be near those hot markets. But I think, I think the affordable markets are not going anywhere anytime soon, and I think they're going to retain their popularity. I mean, we're doing tons of studies in, what was it, Idaho? Some of those Midwest markets have kind of popped up, and we're doing a bunch of studies in kind of the middle of the country that we have a consulting group, and that we wouldn't normally do studies in. So I definitely think those markets are going to continue to grow.
Yeah, we're seeing a bunch of buyers coming in from San Francisco and Los Angeles.
I bet.
Hey, this is crazy, you know. Prices there are just stupid, you know, and it's still affordable here in Arizona. And so until that goes away, and it's not going to go away soon, we're going to see a very, very strong market, I believe.
Well, plus, Dennis, you have for people who like hot weather, I mean, I like the snow, and so I live in the Denver area, but one of my friends just moved to Arizona, actually from Connecticut, because she loves the heat, and she, was more affordable, and she can handle the 110-degree temperatures.
Yeah. David, let's get back to you. So how will cities be reborn and, kind of come out of the pandemic? How do you see that happening?
I think very broadly that one thing that will happen is that people have come to love the fact that the air is cleaner. They can see things they didn't used to be able to see. There are these amazing pictures of, well, Beijing particularly, where suddenly buildings appeared that no one saw before. But I think there's a profound desire. I'm going to agree with Jenny, not surprisingly. I don't think density is going anywhere but up, actually. In part, I'm sorry, this is a little, because higher density correlates directly with better health outcomes, not during well, actually, even during the pandemic. The pandemic has correlated not with density, but poverty, actually. So for instance, when you look at New York, the uber dense neighborhoods of Manhattan have not been affected any more than certainly the suburbs of New York. But boy, go to poorer sections of the Bronx and the numbers are sky high. But to get back to your, what cities we're working with cities like Memphis and Buffalo, New York, and lots of places that have not really established the kind of foothold in the knowledge innovation economy they need to really grow a job base. That's one reason why they're less expensive. For those cities, and these cities will probably succeed, and they'll succeed because of the cool walkable places, including cool walkable places in suburbs that are popping up, actually, I want to note. I love suburbs and cities. Those cities, I think, are really going to have an added period of opportunity that follows this, because I think a lot of folks' lives have something felt much less settled to them, and they are interested in exploring other places. But unless they've got the jobs that particularly educated millennials and others want, the prices can be very, very low, and they won't grow substantially. Is this making sense? It's I think so. I guess say three things. It's all the more important to grow your knowledge economy, basically, in part just to come out of this. Two, greener as you grow denser. And third, the pandemic has cast, and I sort of suggest this, a really harsh light on equity issues. And I think I've noticed every single client that we are working with on projects that may ostensibly have not even addressed equity is now very focused on equity. How can we create opportunity for everybody? How do we create inclusive spaces? Does that get to your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Nancy, let's go back to you. So is this the end of the open floor plan?
I've heard that question asked a few times, and so one of the answers we were getting in the survey is that people really want adaptability and flexibility. And as I hear everybody talk about all the other trends, where the idea that we're going to be able to work from home more is very appealing to a broad range of people. And so they're looking at their home very critically. They can assess it. How does this work for me? What do I want from this? So the open floor plan actually came out as a trend of flexibility. It was the fact that, that all the defined rooms were maybe more difficult for people to fit their lifestyle into. So as you open that plan up, you have more flexibility for how you want to live in it. So I can imagine that in my opinion, the open floor plan is here to stay. But what it does allow for us to think about is other ways of adapting it. So if you remember the old entertainment centers where you fit the big TV and all the stuff in it, what if instead it now becomes a home office center? So on the side of a great room, you've got a home office center and you can open that up. And when you're working from home, that's your office while, your spouse or your roommate is in the home office in the other room. So I think the open floor plan the pandemic is a disruption that actually accelerates some of the trends we were already seeing. And that's something we've all we had good reasons for doing it. And I think there's just more opportunity to adapt to it later.
Okay, so it's not done.
I don't think
we won't throw out all our blueprints, right?
I think if you can open that up to the outdoors, you're now achieving the other thing.
Well, we do that, but it's only good for 8 months out of the year,
Yeah, a connection to the outside, so it's here to stay.
Yeah. Matt, let's get back to sustainability. So everyone used to talk about sustainability and energy efficiency and everything like that. Now we're hearing about health and hygiene and air quality and things like that. How's that balance working?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think with COVID, there's been obviously an overwhelming gain in the health and especially indoor air quality is one topic that we've seen over and over again. The same, I'm going to probably rehash some of what the gang has already said, but we're seeing a lot of the same patterns that are staying. We're actually seeing some gains in certain areas. Like part of our survey, we actually kind of ranked which sustainable attributes are more important to you. And energy efficiency is still at the top of the list. Now, we've seen some gains in durability and resiliency. That's also an important one. But again, to say indoor air quality and health are not far behind. So I think those are still going to be important. Anything that's also tied to the outdoors. We're seeing a lot of talk, and especially it might also just be the time of year, but we're getting a ton of traffic around gardening, permaculture, biophilic design, anything that's bringing people outdoors. We are getting like inundated with requests for that stuff. So it's a really, and again, it plays with people's health and with spending more time at home. I think we all want to be closer to the outdoors. So.
Great. Jenny, let's go back to you. So community amenities, you guys are in that arena as well. So what is COVID-19 doing to community amenities?
Currently, I'd say people are loving when they have, well, I know currently and in the future, but I'd say right now people are loving when they have the access to open trails, the open parks. And I think that's totally going to continue. So I think we're going to start seeing maybe a step away from those behemoth clubhouses, that are all enclosed and separate and become much more open, flexible spaces where multiple people can gather in separate areas, but also outside, more covered outdoor spaces. So, giving them a chance to, I've seen some great, Great Park does a great job with it. And there's a certain, where they'll do multiple outdoor gathering areas, or like the barn at Harvest in Texas is a fantastic example of a really basic, functional, cool, covered outdoor space, lots of picnic tables, little basketball thing on the back. And it's great and functional and multi-purpose. So I'd say kind of a stronger connection to the outdoors, continued embracement of parks and flexible uses of spaces and connection to trails.
Yeah, we're looking at that thing. In fact, we're planning 2 new communities, and they'll both have zip lines.
Oh, how fun!
Kind of cool. No one's doing that yet. So Betsy said we were a little crazy sometimes, and we are. But these are 2 big communities, and we can afford to do zip lines, and we think that's a great amenity. Ashley, let's go back to you on your thing. So how do you see your design changing in your homes?
That's a great question. Like I said, we are a portfolio builder. We do, my production team would laugh and say we're a custom builder, but we are a portfolio builder, and we do have a vast catalog of options. So we really, we're all about the open floor plan and being able to take those spaces and modify them to our buyers' needs. Again, we are getting those active adults. So we've seen some trends in terms of, enlarging the master, or really our top selling floor plan is one that has been a little different, that has, it actually has an optional study in the front, and then also has a small pocket office. So we're seeing an increased, demand to be able to utilize just spaces in different ways. So we have our pulse on some different designs, but as of right now, we're just kind of incorporating some of the different options people are requesting. We actually just did a live-in suite for another side of the family. So instead of taking like the 2 bedrooms, the guest bath, we turned it into a second master. So we try to be flexible enough where if we think we can sell it again, we'll do it, but we haven't necessarily changed too much design at this point.
Great. So Nancy, we've talked about all this idea of flexible design. So what can that mean?
I think it means adapting to, say people want to be able to have a couple of home offices. They want to be able to have somewhere, a mudroom off the, off the entry to the home. So we actually have seen a design already where the downstairs bedroom had an ensuite bath, but now we're adding an extra optional door. So as you come in from the garage, you can come directly into that bathroom and wash down before you go into the house. So it's the flexibility of allowing that. It's the flexibility of a space, going back to, whether it options as a home office, a bedroom, a den. I love the idea of the movable walls and the ability to us to start bringing that sensibility into homes where people can help if they stay in a home for some time, they have the ability to change how they use it over the period of a lifetime or how their family lives in it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for flexibility that we haven't even explored yet.
Are we doing a permanent solution for a temporary situation?
I think that, like we were saying earlier, all of this is accelerating things we were already starting to see. We've already started to see in office spaces, for instance, the idea of walls that you can come into an office space and put them up for your current use and then take them with you as a tenant improvement. We're starting to see manufacturers come up with that sort of thing for homes as well. So I think it's just accelerating some of our other trends. That's what'll stick out of all of this. Pandemics in the past have caused design changes. That's where powder rooms and closets came from. We're past pandemics. So we're going to see some of these changes stick for the future.
David, what do you think about the future?
What do I think about the future?
Yeah.
Unknowable. No. Well, better than today. How's that? I think, well, it's interesting. I'm just fascinated by demographics, which probably is fully obvious. Urban Land Institute had a couple folks who say demographics are destiny, and I've paid a lot of attention to that. And one thought that, as I listened to all of you, which has just been fascinating, comes back to not so much many fewer households with kids, but the fact that more than half of U.S. population growth is going to be over 65 for the next 20 years. Literally, I mean, this is the new norm. At the same time, when you have a severe labor shortage, it's not so, well, for a whole bunch of reasons, you're less likely to retire at 62, certainly, or even at 65, or if you're me, even go past 70, because you're needed, among other things. And people really are going to try and keep you in the labor force. Now, there are a whole lot of folks in that category who I think are going to be just, particularly after COVID, very interested in working from home, but will continue to want to work. And so each time I hear one of you talk about another version of home office or work remotely, I think that will also be driven by demographics. That's a trend that will also, to Nancy, to use term you've been using, be accelerated by the pandemic. I do think that the ultimate amenity after the pandemic, and in some ways it even is today, will continue to actually be walkability. And by that I mean genuine walkability, a place where you don't just have trees and a nice sidewalk, you have cool places to go grab coffee and more coffee and more coffee and beer and run into friends, walkable community probably. And that takes a certain density to make real. And I think that density, which is probably at least 50 units to the acre and may go up to 100 units to the acre, will ultimately be what drives the future of suburbs, urban neighborhoods as they redevelop, and basically the underdeveloped and sort of next stage developing parts of our regions. And I know that fits in different ways with the things that different ones of you do, but to me, that would be, if you want to really look at the large numbers, that's where demand will go for the next 20 years.
I got a message from Betsy here that said that Matt had just toured a passive house in, I guess it was California, and had movable walls. How'd that work?
Yeah, so actually we just posted a video about that. A little bit like you mentioned, Ashley, with almost like a pocket office. Very small footprint house. You can check it out at buildwithrise.com. It is or on our YouTube channel, but very small footprint house. I think it was maybe around 1,100 square feet total. But it didn't actually have movable, like, pivoting walls per se, but it did have almost like, think of a wall with like there was a pantry and a pocket office, and another one was a door, but very kind of similar, like multi-use type room. So, yeah.
So I've seen the hotels where you wall off rooms and you could make a big room out of a small room. Is that similar to what they're talking about here?
Matt, were you going to answer that one?
Go for it.
You're thinking of what we think of like almost like an accordion or a panel type sliding door. They've got them a little more suitable for an office or a residential space, or it could be a glass wall. It could look like a permanent wall. It'll have, and it may not be movable in a minute. It may be more like you put it in temporarily and then you deconstruct it later.
Right.
That kind of an option.
A lot of talk is about privacy, and having a husband and wife working together, and they're on a Zoom call or something like that. It's really difficult, and it's very challenging. And so, do you need two whole home offices, or can you divide one up? And we're also talking about we just created an option to soundproof home offices. And we just put some extra insulation in there, and we're just kind of selling it as a a home office package. So things like that we're always trying to think about. That are there other things that we should be looking at? That, hey, how about that? How about this idea? That we haven't even thought about yet.
Yeah, there's certainly some of these systems build in the soundproofing. So they build in the conduit. They build in, a number of different features can come in with that kind of a wall system.
Yeah.
Well, in the multiple offices, you were mentioning, Dennis, we've had lots of debates about, okay, if two people are working from home, how do you handle that? Do you really want to spend 2 bedrooms worth of square footage? And I say no. I have a full office with French doors, but I use half of it. And so I always think about, and multiple of my friends have done this, where, they'll have the one full office, but then having a flexible space that they can go to for the second one. And maybe they share the full office sometimes and separate for calls, or they work separately. But I've seen, the office in the loft, or the office, and one of my friends is actually using the office in her mudroom that came with the house and suddenly found some interest. So I think having the flexibility, like Nancy mentioned, and I don't know that it's 2 full offices, but having that alternative space and the flexibility within the one office to be able to either share or separate as needed for like a Zoom call or something like that. I think that's the key, is giving them the alternatives and options.
The coolest implementation I've seen of that is it's a commercial application, but they're almost like call pods, and they just have a nice glass door. You can just hop in. You've got a nice little desk, and I don't know if that would fly for homes, but I personally love that application for working workspaces.
We're actually looking at that kind of an application in multifamily buildings, where you've got those funny corners where something else may not fit, but you can imagine somebody in an apartment who's trying to both work in the same home. So if you have those kinds of pods available as, a micro amenities, so to speak, where you can go into that pod on your floor in that funny corner of the multifamily building, and there you're able to get away for that phone call meeting.
We've done, I was on an urban design ULI awards, their national awards jury, and we looked at a series of just fascinating projects a couple of years ago. One of which was a multi-building in Seattle. I've forgotten the name, but basically it was probably the highest dollar per square foot rental in Seattle. And basically they had turned the entire, they had attempted to lease the ground floor, failed, turned it over to the best known chef in Seattle, who turned it into a series of just amazing spaces where you could work, get coffee, meet clients, etc. And it was just full of folks doing that. and also buy gourmet wines and anything else you might want. But it was probably the updated urban community center that a suburban subdivision might have had at one point, and hugely successful. I'm obviously the one here who thinks that the future for in writ large is going to be multifamily, not single family. But I think the ability to provide shared amenities, Nancy, like what you just addressed last, will be absolutely critical and central to how successful those will be, including, frankly, all the way to, as we move increasingly into the era of shared mobility, access to shared mobility, not just the spaces you provide.
We have a couple of questions that have come in from attendees, and if you're participating in today's session, feel free again to type in any questions or comments that you have in the Q&A field or in the text field. But I'll read first a comment from Terry. Millennials are the largest growing demographic, and they're starting family years later than earlier generations. Could flexible floor plans work for them as well? Couple becomes a family, but can stay in their home. Any thoughts on that front from the group?
Shoot, why not? I mean, I was in a 1-bedroom apartment when I had my daughter, and we ended up taking the great room space, you know, the open sort of living area, and building sort of a partial wall with a bookshelf to create a separate nursery until we could move into a 2-bedroom. So I think creating the flexibility, you know, that office can move to another space if you have the nursery, and so absolutely, why not?
And so if we can show as designers, show home buyers how they might be able to do that, that might help them understand how they could use the home maybe differently than the way it might have been modeled just for one type of family. Absolutely, Nancy. It's all about, to me, helping your buyers see what the possibilities are. So, you know, whether that's the architect or the builder or the interior merchandiser, and highlighting those opportunities that maybe they wouldn't see when you know, like Ashley was talking about, doing the Matterport and walking them through it so they can really see all the cool features. So I think education goes a long way.
We're putting in a green screen in 2 of our models. And so in the home, we got a home office and we have the green screen there, and he just, oh, there's the image. It's pretty subtle, but I think it'll work.
We have one question in here about, I find that it's very powerful, the difference between words and perspectives. And there's a question related to safety versus health. So this initially, you know, comes to mind when we look at the study that you've done, Nancy, with Terry, and everyone on the, you know, the American Home Study, and the majority of your respondents had defined home first and foremost as a safe place. I'd like to hear what people have to say about safety versus health, and can you clarify what they meant by safe?
In the study, we gave people a number of choices of how they would identify for their home, and in a safe place, 91% of the respondents ranked that as number 1. Keep in mind, they're coming right out of, you know, we've all got to work at home in the pandemic. It certainly is something they're definitely relating that sense of safety to unknown factors outside their home and how that might keep them healthy. So it translates into, how do I keep it's not necessarily a sense of security in this case. It was really more a sense of, how do I keep my home safe and healthy? How do I use germ-resistant materials? Do I have a place for people to drop packages where they can stay clean before I bring them in the house? Do I have a way to wash down when I come in the house? It certainly was related to that in terms of when we related it to the other ways people answered questions in the study.
Quick follow-up, or did you want to go to the next question?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, so to put this in from a different perspective, one of the things that I noted, particularly after 2008, was when we would talk to folks, and this is going to be urban and density again, about what their sense of a safe and healthy environment was. They increasingly said no longer was it a suburb where they felt they were safer from crime. It was a city where they walked more, because they were increasingly aware of lots of data that shows that incidences of public health problems basically rise inversely with density. Literally, the denser a community on balance, income, education held constant, the fewer public health issues folks have and the longer lifespans are, because walking turns out to be the #1 activity that correlates basically with both a healthier life and a longer lifespan. And one reason I'm confident that folks who are now more health conscious will, as I'll give Jenny credit for this, continue to like cities, will be that data is going to come back in lots of forms, and people are going to take it even more seriously.
We have another comment. If anyone else has anything on that front, interrupt me and let me know. But we have another comment about ADUs, saying that ADUs and laneway houses seem like the hottest solution for adding density and walkability to suburbs. I know we've been hearing a lot more about them. They're cropping up at, demonstration projects at IBS and other shows. When we'll get back to those, we don't know. But how popular is it really from your perspective for those of you on the phone?
Comment on that one. So we're actually seeing a lot of movement on the ADU side, especially from a prefab perspective. We're seeing a lot of essentially the industrialization of homes happening. A lot of California-based companies in the tech sector are actually focused on solving that problem. So a lot of these new ADUs that are popping up are prefabs built with extreme precision, off-site, and then put in place to densify neighborhoods. And so we're actually seeing a ton of it. Actually, a lot of our sites traffic is because of ADUs. I actually went to see one in California just last year where a homeowner took they owned the primary residence, and then just in their backyard decided to build and he was an architect, built a passive house, actually one of the first 4 passive homes in Southern California. And anyway, it's quite a thing. It's really, really impressive. It solves a lot of problems. They can rent out the front house and then live in the back. And to me, it's a fantastic problem to solve. And I think just to continue on one of the points that was made earlier, and just addressing that walkability, you don't have to go too far, and still you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, sort of thing. So yeah, ADUs are awesome.
ADUs are also one of the most effective ways to provide affordable housing, as it turns out. And you probably all know this, but well, actually, the city of Santa Cruz in central, so I guess almost northern California, it was one of the first cities to basically allow ADUs essentially across the city, basically to address affordability. The city of Vancouver basically has allowed ADUs in every single neighborhood in Vancouver at this point, and they've been quite effective. The other argument for ADUs, and this gets back to an aging population, a rapidly aging population, and Matt, this gets a little bit to the fellow who moved into his passive solar house or passive house and rent out his own house. If you've got a single family house and you're now 1 or 2 of you, and you want to stay in your neighborhood, the ability to build an ADU to help you afford to stay there, particularly as you move into the fixed income stage of life, or to move into, is just a terrific solution.
Yeah, and there's different alternatives to that as well. Like I think of even our own scenario at home, and we don't have a garage at home, and we've always wanted one. So maybe 5-10 years down the road, we decide to build a garage. Well, how about building a garage with living space above it, or beside it? So it kind of solves 2 problems, or maybe the kids move into that piece of the home, or we rent it out. So it does provide with different alternate scenarios. So yeah.
We'll rent you a garage, Matt. No problem. We'll build you one and send it to you, whatever. You can put whatever you want in there. If you want a mudroom in there, we can do it.
Thanks.
My dear company has a very active mobility innovation group, particularly looking at autonomous mobility. And what they have, and boy, does this affect life as a planner, because literally in 20 years, those of us in communities that are dense enough probably won't own a autonomous vehicle. We'll use shared autonomous vehicles, and we're going to have an awful lot of garages to be converted into ADUs across this country.
There's a comment from Ray Antonino that you can see in the comments field, but he said spot on that front. They just announced a partnership with Boxable, which is a very cool ADU company that we went to visit up in Seattle a year or so ago on one of our road trips, and they are handling permitting for the 1,400 pre-sales that they already have. So very interesting thing, and that could actually solve some of the home office, second home office problems as a flex space as well. But we had one question I want to make sure that we don't miss. This is for Nancy. Will you be doing, and the same question could be said for Matt, and actually for Jenny as well. I know you guys have a study coming out, but they asked specifically if you would be doing a follow-up to the America at Home study after there's a vaccine, to see if they feel differently or the same as they felt when they took the study initially.
We're actually planning a follow-up by this fall. We don't think there'll be a vaccine yet, but even a follow-up this fall as people have settled into the new way of doing things, or maybe able to go back to the offices. We're seeing lots of surveys about how many people even want to go back to the office or continue working from home. So we'll certainly follow up this fall. I think that there could be a real need to do the same after a vaccine as well, because the study's telling us so much information about how people really, what people really want. We're asking the consumer as opposed to just speculating. So yes, we plan to.
If we don't get to a question that somebody poses here, we'll reach out to everyone and answer that afterward. There's one more question on ADUs. We're at 2 minutes to 3 on East Coast time. We go to 3:15. So we'll take this last question that's in here, and then I'm going to turn the floor back over to Dennis for a few minutes. And if everybody hangs on until quarter after, we just have some things that are coming up on the Alliance front that we can share with you as well, other resources that you might be interested in. So the last question that we have at the moment in the chat function is, again, about ADUs, popular topic. What about the cost for ADUs and how do the homeowners fund them? Does anybody have any insights on that front? If not, it's okay, because we actually know a lot of people in the ADU business. So if nobody jumps in, that's fine. We'll get that question answered for you. So let's take one more that you guys might have an answer to. When it comes to future design trends, how can creating and pre-designing the ambiance of interiors amenities change how people think about and use that space?
I kind of touched on that earlier, was, you know, if you show residents what the or consumers what the possibilities are for the space, I think it really helps them see opportunities. So if you set the stage for a home office, or if you set the stage for a home office shared with a workout room, I mean, it gives them the light bulb moment of, oh wow, I could use this for both. So I think great sort of design and great interiors really help buyers see that, or renters see that next level and see the opportunities.
So it's more of a marketing issue than a design issue in the longer, like a permanent design issue to some degree. It can be.
Kind of hand in hand.
We can digitally design in 3D now in a way that can show people multiple ways of seeing a space.
Absolutely.
What we look at is what is the buyer looking for? And you give them a whole bunch of choices. And not just this can be a den and this can be a garage, but this can be this. You can take your 3-car garage and make it a 1-car garage. You can, you know, and we give them all those choices, you know, and they go, hey, we really appreciate this because we're buying this new house because we get to personalize it. It's not a used house, it's a new home. And so they get to personalize it. And this is really, isn't this why we're in business? Is to create that dream and be able to personalize that house and have the buyer go, hey, this is exactly what I wanted. I'm not going to settle for a used house somewhere, you know? And I think we can do that. And here's the problem. we're so bent on, following the big guys, the multi-state builders and things like that, and they're really concerned with costs, and I'm not concerned with taking care of their customers because their whole thing is, you know, different things and different ways of looking at it. But if we have a whole bunch of options already done and ready for the buyer to select, that's way easier and way more cost effective than not having those. And so that's kind of what we should be looking at.
Yeah, just to chime in on that too, I think that's so, marketing and showing, we created this option. We have pretty large, what we call loggias, covered loggias on the back porch that may be 13 by 30. But, we created this outdoor fireplace with a flat screen TV prep. And, once people can see that and feel it and walk into that indoor outdoor space, it's incredible. I think we sell it in almost every home now because people, because it's more tangible. And just to your point, you're going through such a big, you're making such a big investment emotionally, and to be able to think about every little thing, but to have your experts, show it and let you know that you have these options. I think it really helps buyers figure out that is what they want or what they don't want.
Yeah.
Any other questions from your front, Dennis? I have one or two that I'll share on my end, if not, and then we can let everybody know about a couple of upcoming events.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you to go back to the whole safety versus health question. Do you guys see, when I was looking at some of the trend information, I thought it was more of just the same trends that were starting to emerge earlier in the year when you see things like the Chowa House at the Builder Show that was done by Woodside Homes. And, Dennis has been doing things with Energy Star and Indoor Air Plus for years. And, Thrive Home Builders is another builder in our community who is based in Denver and does a lot of really progressive things from a healthy home perspective. And that's core part of their platform. We're also seeing that with the amenities through the builders or through the developers, through their health and wellness centers that they have as well. Do you think as people are talking about safety over the last couple of months, it's really in essence the same trend to a certain degree, and it's just flipped because the perspective has been more of a necessity and slightly more of a negative spin because of what's been going on in the US, and that maybe we'll go back to the trajectory as we get more fully open and as we get a vaccine, that it's just back to healthy home. What do you think the differences are between how people are talking about safety now and health now and where we'll be in the future? Like, what are there any main differences that you're seeing now from the trend that we were looking at earlier in the year?
I think there's the potential for a couple of things. One might be looking at there's germ-resistant materials and products out there. There's antimicrobial, quartz countertops. Some of them have antimicrobial properties baked into them. Those kinds of that, if we're thinking about safety in the future, does that take, like as you say, the health and wellness clinics trend, other kinds of healthy trends, and it's a good thing if our homes become healthier places to live. And so if any of this sticks into the future and becomes, a long-term trend, I think all of us can see the benefits of it, whether it's the materials, the air quality, the energy efficiency, all of that. It makes our homes, the biophilia, the indoor, outdoor, all of that makes them better places, and home builders are set up for that.
Okay. Anyone else on that?
A lot of it has to do with the degree. When you look at who's buying houses and things like that, you have some people that are a little more adamant about the COVID virus than other people, and there's different degrees in which their concern is fabricated. And so, and you have people that are, kind of, well, this is a hoax, or this doesn't work, or this is stupid, or something like that. And So, and then somewhere in between, there's the rational people, you know. That's the majority, but I'm not sure. There's just crazy things going on in our societies these days. But I look at what's important to people is important to that person and may not be important to the next person. And so if a healthy home is really important to someone, they'll buy it over another home in a minute, and they'll spend as much money as it takes, because the health of their family is way more important than anything else. And we see it with indoor air plugs, because we do a big deal with indoor air plugs because so few builders don't do it, and it's just crazy. It's such an easy thing to do, and it just makes your, you know, from a marketing standpoint, it's, you know, you just sell a bunch of houses. It's like it's a license to print money, you know. But a lot of people just don't get that, and so that's fine, you know. We won't tell them, you know. But if you have your millennial buyer, which is our main buyer, and they're 35 years old and they got 2 kids and one of them has asthma, and we have a house that has indoor air plus, and the next house down the street doesn't, what are they going to buy? They're going to buy from us. So we're using it as a competitive advantage to say, hey, we have a healthy house. Now we got to be careful what we say and things like that, and we don't make guarantees and things like that. But we're getting all this stuff certified from a third-party governmental agency run by the EPA, and that's good enough for our buyers. It's good enough for them. It's just it's a matter of, you know, saying, okay, we care about you. That's the other thing. If a buyer thinks that you care about them, they're more apt to buy from you than someone that doesn't care about you.
One question related to that. So that's an example what you guys are doing with EPA of really taking the lead and putting that out there and saying, this is something that we're going to do for the benefit of our customers, and kind of explaining that. So the last question I have for you guys relates to the balance of listening to your customers and talking to them and doing things that meet their unmet needs that they may not even have thought of. I mean, the iPhone is an example of that. I think we're all sitting here with our phones, you know, prompting us and looking. It's just a second nature now. But before the phone became what it was, we didn't know how much we needed it. It didn't become something that really contributed to our lives in the way that different technologies and different features within homes can, and communities and cities, whatever scale you're looking at, whether it's, you know, remodeling something or building something new, whether it's buying something or renting something. I don't think that really matters. So what do you guys think the balance is of listening to consumer insights versus leading by leveraging influence that you have in the industry? That's a loaded question up there, Jenny.
No. So actually, as you mentioned, we're doing a survey of home shoppers and buyers, and that's part of what we're getting at is more about livability and how they're living in their home, and then taking that data and working with, you know, the experts. Because as you said, what if you asked a buyer what they wanted with their phone, would they literally hold up like the iPhone or the iPod and be like, oh, this is totally what I need? It was outside of their realm. So I think great architects and designers and builders can really, you know, if we understand how they live in their home, we can problem solve for them and come up with things they didn't know they needed. So I think there's a great opportunity, or like Dennis was talking about, you know, indoor air plus, you know, being on the forefront of that. I know Thrive does that too. You know, they've created these healthy homes that people didn't necessarily know were a possibility, and so I think it's kind of a partnership. We have to listen to our consumers and then extrapolate and really help think outside the box and create great stuff for them.
Anyone else on that front?
I'll add, as usual, a different sort of note, but one of the things, and this is as a planner talking to communities as a group, as opposed to the individuals buying each home or each apartment, we are entering a period, all kinds of things are happening over the next 20 years that are changing dramatically, but I want to come back to mobility, because within the next, probably by the end of the next decade, that's 1 decade from now, 10 years, a majority of cars on the road in the US will have enough technology to self-park. And if anybody watched the Super Bowl and saw the Hyundai ad, a car can self-park 3 inches from another car as long as it lets you out first. So as we are talking with clients who are often developers, we're pointing out that in 10 years, they may need 20% less space to park, or conversely, park 20 or 30% more cars in the space they build today, meaning we are beginning to approach the period of sort of peak parking requirement. Now, how this, other than making more room for home offices and garages, affect what much of you do, I'm not sure. But then the next 10 years will be the era in which autonomous mobility really becomes the new paradigm. And once again, in areas that can have enough density to support on demand, and that can be closer in suburbs as well as cities, it'll be so much more convenient and so much less expensive just to touch your iPhone and have a car come pick you up in 2 minutes. It's a very different experience than a shared Lyft or Uber today. And that will be the end of the requirement for parking. And actually, we did work for a little while with a large master plan community builder in Florida who was talking about the fact they could save X dollars per house in 10 years and 2X in 20 years and factoring that in. But I think the disappearance of parking as a major influence, particularly in urban areas, but across the board in how we plan, develop, market, will be a fundamental trend over the next 20 years. Yep. Where we need to take the lead, because boy, say that to somebody today and give them a blank stare. That's right.
Okay, if anyone else doesn't have any comments, I'm just going to share a couple of closing items with you. This has been a very, very busy week for us. For those of you who've been looking at our calendar, we have the event today, but tomorrow we are launching a new product, which is our BIM roadmap. And we, over the last 2 years, we've been working on content related to this. And we're going to be on Dave Cooper Live, along with some folks from MyTech and Simpson Strong Tie and Tilson Home Corporation and a guy by the name of Charlie Wardell, if you guys have read things from him before. He writes quite a bit for Builder Magazine and Professional Builder and other professional publications in the industry. But he was the chief content architect for us and did a lot of research with us to build that document. So I'm excited to show it to you guys. There is a little teaser of it that's going to be available for everybody to look at on the web. And it's also going to be completely free to anyone who's a current member or partner in the Alliance. So I would encourage you guys to take a look at that. We are also on, today is Tuesday, that's tomorrow, and then on Thursday, we have our first happy hour. We've been doing a couple of these coffee talks on different subjects over the last couple of months. We did one on offsite construction with people from MBI and McKinsey and other groups on that front who are going to be, some of whom are going to be rejoining us for the happy hour. We also did a session, Dennis, that was much more focused on the technology and marketing side with Garmin Homes and Matterport and Terry from TST Inc. And others. Paul Curtis was among those folks as well. And we did most recently 2 weeks ago a session looking at the future of business with George Casey, Margaret Whelan, Stephen Kim, and others. So what we're wanting to do with these happy hours is, I know a lot of times there's a lot of great information that comes out of these discussions and a lot of interesting people that you're hearing from that you want to get to know better. And we're inviting people to come back for happy hour at 4 o'clock on Thursday, 4 o'clock Eastern, for an hour, and we're going to create a few rooms. So if you want to meet somebody who is in the offsite session and ask them a follow-up question or say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about looking at modular for my business. I know we had a couple people on the line who mentioned modular as a solution as well. Or if you want to say, hey, I thought that was really interesting what you did with what you did in the pandemic with some of those virtual tours that you're doing. So if you have an idea that you want to share with that group, if you want to make a more personal connection with some of those people, we will be online. We'll see how everything goes. It's our first one on Thursday of this week. And you're welcome to join us. You just need to, it's going to be a meeting rather than a webinar. So your smiling faces will be live as soon as you log in and allow your cameras to be there. But you do need to register for that. That's on our website as well. And we've also had a lot of traction and interest, and there's some really good data, and I think there might even be an article related to it from the American Home Study about single family rentals and renting versus owning, and some great things that have been written about that so far. But that's another topic that we've been digging into, and there's a lot of interest among our builders and developers and architects and so forth in the community. So we're going to be doing a coffee talk on the 21st of July. It's the only coffee talk in July, as we are all taking a couple of days of vacation, and our office is going to be closed at the beginning of July. But in the meantime, whenever you have time and you're looking for good stories and what others are doing in innovation, we also have our podcast series that's co-created with the University of Denver. And there are a ton of new episodes on that as well. So thank you to our panelists for participating today and sharing their insights. Thank you to everybody who attended. And look for an email follow-up from Natalie with the archive of the webinar, as well as some other resources from the Coffee Talk. And also be watching your email for 2 live events that we've got coming up that are half-day and 2-day events online in August on Healthy Home, and then in November on a bigger picture look at the future of home delivery. So watch your email for more details on that front. Thank you everyone for your time, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Betsy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.